Hello and welcome to your first assignment. It is a conceptual assignment. And so I'm asking you, who are you? In the coursework folder, there's a bunch of different ways that I've put up there to help you generate your ideas. There's a free personality test that may help you generate some ideas. And I want you to approach this in a conceptual way. And what I mean by that is really you're thinking about the idea. When you ask yourself, who are you? You can, jot down 10, words that you feel like describe who you are, and think about those 10 words. And if you can visualize them, use universal symbols that you feel like represent this idea that you come up with. The conceptual photography has been around for a while in photography, and it's just recently becoming much more popular. I think it's going to be an interesting way to start off our semester. So I'm asking both of my Photo 2 classes this same thing, to interpret this first assignment as conceptually as you can. And maybe you will continue this through the semester or maybe not. But, as you're moving further in your photography career, you're going to have to get more adventurous and experimental with your imagery. And school is the best place to do that because, trying things out, even if they don't work out, is going to benefit your artistic growth than anything else. So I want to talk about conceptual photographs. And I'm showing you a range of digital and darkroom images. And it's really kind of up to you if you want to do something monochromatic, or if you want to do something that's heavily photoshopped, or if you want to add painting or any kind of computer skills that you have. Really it's completely up to you how you want to interpret the work, but you need to do it based off of the class you're in. So if you're in a film class, you need to do this, starting off with film. And if you're in a digital class, you're starting off with your digital image. And then however you handle the post-production is really kind of up to you. So conceptual photography is about the idea, right? And a lot of time this is interpreted using visual metaphors, create mood, using images or objects that evoke emotion, using lighting or a pose or a room or your surrounding spaces to help evoke your idea. Yeah, so let's go through some of these images that people have done, and hopefully this sparks some idea for you. Now, the first conceptual photograph was done using a daguerreotype. It was done in 1840, and it was Hippolyte Bayard, and he was, and the invention of photography was done by a lot of scientists, and he was overlooked. This man, he is not dead. He's pretending to do a Victorian death portrait because the history books don't recognize his contributions towards the invention of photography. So he is making a statement here in this image because he's not being recognized. So it's as if he didn't exist and didn't contribute to the invention of photography. And he did. He didn't play a huge role, but some of the other people like Daguerre, Matisse, and other people got recognition that he didn't. So this is a conceptual photograph. He's using his place in history, and making a statement about, what was lacking. It's a brilliant way of making an image, goes with the part. One of my favorite artists is Dwayne Michaels. I do think that you should look him up and look at his work. Especially those of you in my film class. He works a lot in series, and we will look at him when we talk about this. This is another one where this is titled Portrait as If I Were Dead, similar to what Bayard did. And this is a double exposure image. And in Photoshop, this is pretty easy to do. If you don't move the camera, you can photograph yourself in different positions. If you have your camera on a tripod, and then just very easily make selections out of sections and then rebuild the image. But Michaels liked the idea of using a little bit of ambiguity in his subjects. This is a portrait of Joseph Cornell, who was a recluse artist, very famous, did a lot of three-dimensional, kind of found sculptures. And, the way this has got some movement in it, it's a very dark room, and the light's kind of burning into Cornell's body, leaving just this kind of crazy shape. Play with your meter, experiment with your shutter speeds. This is an easy thing to kind of reproduce. And it's this juxtaposition between this very feminine space and a man who, was kind of, it kind of parlays information about his life and his childhood and everything like that. So it's very, very interesting. Michaels was also, kind of thinking about big issues, like who we are in the universe and where our place is. And here he just washes out the face as if, kind of talking about metaphysics and particles and what makes up humans and how we fit into space and all of that, just by obscuring the face and the details. It's really quite imaginative and creative. This is a portrait he did of René Magritte, the surrealist painter. Again, there's a lot of a double exposure combination things happening. So he's seated here, but then you can also see his reflection in the mirror there. He actually photographed Magritte quite a bit and did several different versions of this. I really love how the seat, kind of looks like someone was just sitting there. So that's kind of a cool aspect. John Hillard is another conceptual photographer, one looking into dealing a lot of times with multiple images and photographing images within an image, using more than one image to kind of talk about an idea. Again, how you want to interpret this assignment is really kind of up to you. This something as simple as just focusing on different parts of a picture here. Filling the room with crumpled pieces of paper that he has suspended on fishing line. It almost feels like we're looking at a slow-mo of an explosion, or again, dealing with particles rather than a whole thing. So you can be very deliberate when you play with ambiguity in conceptual work. And that just means kind of don't be afraid to kind of mix signals. Or you can be very specific with interpretations, like to specific symbols about you or what it is you're trying to communicate. John Baldessari is an American artist who I think is really interesting. In the 70s, he was a painter to start off with, and he moved to photography later. And he burned all of his, he burned all of his works, in the 60s. And he had friends, he documented the whole thing. He just felt like they weren't doing that worthy. And so he just really literally burned them, kept the ashes, and created this piece. And then right after that, he painted this: "I will not make any more boring art." And there's actually a video of him writing this out repeatedly, so to kind of make it sink in. And he started up with photography and painting on top of, or using stickers even. These round circles are the stickers that you can buy at an office supply place. He's just started covering up people's faces. He's kind of an irreverent person. And so, it does have meaning about it could be anybody behind these stickers. But also he said later that he was just sick of looking at people's faces. So he just wanted to cover them up. But this idea of what we do in public places, how we act within groups, and showing various things off, commenting on the art scene at the time, right? So there's a lot kind of going on in these paintings. This is one I did when I was in graduate school. I kind of was trying to figure out what I was going to be doing my first semester there, and I came up with a couple different images, and this one, it's like as if I'm trying to have a conversation with myself, but it's not really happening, right? The seat's empty. There seems to be a separation, this gap. The window kind of symbolizes a gap in space, in understanding and what I'm planning on doing. It's really kind of fun. You kind of go through this process, and this is something I talk about in some of my other classes. And this basically, these 6 sentences represent the creative process. So one thing you have to do as you push and you get further into your, medium, is you go through this. You come up with an idea and you think it's really awesome. And you're so excited, and you start shooting and you start developing the idea. And then you get to this point where you're like, wait, this is a little bit hard. Am I communicating correctly? Am what I'm trying to relate showing up in my images? Is it working? We ask ourselves. What happens next is you start to doubt yourself, and you start to think that you're not doing anything right. Now, this is where you start thinking, what you're doing is shit. And every creative person goes through this process, I promise you. The thing is not to quit at this point when you're going through what you're making is not working, and then it transcends to I'm not that good at what I'm doing. This is where we lose 80% of creative people. It's the 20% that keep pushing their ideas further and saying, okay, the idea is okay. I just need to maybe rethink what I'm doing, put a little bit more thought into that. And then you do come to this might be okay stage of things. And then once you stay with it and you keep working on something, you do get back to that. This is awesome. My idea is successful. Now, this creative process is something that you will go through at some point. It may not be this semester, it may be later on, but every creative person goes through this, right? And it's the people who give up. That's the sad part, is they don't follow through with it. So really take some chances here, take some risks. Okay, so let's keep looking through now. A lot of these examples I found online, but I thought that they fit the assignment really well. And so this one's called I Miss You, right? And I think, this is a nice interpretation or way of portraying missing somebody. This one was untitled, and this was on Pinterest. The artist is unknown. So don't be afraid to use props. Props, again, can be these universal symbols for things. This passion of music, but you're kind of blinded by how you go about it or where your inspiration comes from. This one is a little bit dark, but I kind of like this. This is like, kind of a clown face on a spring that kind of comes out of that music box. And I think here we're seeing some really skilled technical aspects. So you cannot forget that part of photography. Your print needs to look good, your image quality. You can do manipulations or effects on the image however you think it will help your idea. This one's called Resilient. Really quite clever. And I like this idea as well. This almost looks like a scanned, like someone put their face on a flatbed scanner, which is a way of creating a digital image, absolutely. But somehow, hiding part of a face with a certain kind of color that evokes emotion. All the colors, symbolize something. So red is a violent color, it's blood, it's fire, but it's also passion and love. White, we think of purity. Wings, we think of freedom, and even doves can be symbol of peace or God, right? So think about what objects you might photograph. This one is highly photoshopped, right? Creating a new kind of structure off of all these different kinds of yellow houses. And, has to do with destruction and storms if you look at the surrounding. One thing I think of too, one way to communicate mood is, of course, by lighting, but also pose and what you're around. So if you think about this pose of being, huddled, protective, that's almost like being back in the womb. It appears he doesn't have clothes on, so there's a vulnerability automatically associated to this. It's not sexualized in any way, for sure. The lighting is very kind of moody and dark. And these pieces of wood, kind of are about the roots and symbolize, maybe his place or his growth. I don't know. I just think this one is really quite beautiful. Mind-blowing news in this one. Obviously, that's paint on the wall. But again, it's kind of making a comment on an idea of what's going on in the world. I mean, there's so much you can draw from that's going on right now, socially, politically, just thinking about the news, thinking about the state of our nation, thinking about maybe what you're going through, if you've been affected by COVID or job loss or money troubles or, whatever it is, that can be part of who you are. Yeah. And you can also kind of have a little fun with this as well. This constant hovering. First of all, I would think this would be a fun photo shoot to try if you had a friend willing, right? But it's the time to be experimental. It's the time to try crazy things. And I think if you do, and you keep an open mind, you might end up with something very successful. So this has got some post-production, but also some props. So the feathers are kind of glued to his skin, but then the bird image has been photoshopped on. And this is by Alex Curry. Again, I think the use of the background, the use of the props is very strong. This is just called Rainbow. I didn't find the artist of this, but again, I think the way that it's composed and there's kind of no sense of space, but we're just looking at the color and the facial expression and the eyes is really lovely. Here's another one. If you're good at makeup or you want to play around with this, I mean, there's something kind of very interesting about the edge of the paint, the edge of the black, and the texture it's creating, and this juxtaposition between the bright eyes and the dark skin. The background is out of focus, so it's a very shallow depth of field. So we know that they're using a wide open aperture, which could be f2, f1.8, something like that, to get this look. And I just thought this one was kind of fun too. Right? So you might look around your house, look for kind of crazy things you might be able to use in a portrait. Obviously don't harm anybody or anything like that, but there's a lot of fun to have. Now this was done by a student who took this class several years ago, and I thought this was, really quite beautiful and kind of had the emotion and the conceptual idea, and it's a little bit ambiguous, but white is kind of seen as a symbol of purity. This could be kind of a rebirth kind of idea, things like that. So hopefully this is giving you some ideas for the assignment. You have two to three images due, and please note the new schedule for when the due date is. Okay, email me if you have any questions, but really let's see what you can come up with. All right, remember, trying and trying new things is more important than anything in my book. All right? Okay, good luck.